In this example, we're going to show you how you can create all of the vectors for the magic bean sign. We're going to use a combination of tools to draw up the shapes that you can see here, from entering values in the shape forms to using the transform shortcut keys for quicker shape creation, and we'll also make use of the smart snapping feature to easily position shapes to the geometry in my part. We'll look at editing them and creating the text that you can see here. So let's just go to File, we'll close that down, and then we'll go and create a new file. So let's create a single-sided job, and we're going to go with a width of 24 inches, the height of that is going to be 36 inches, and then the overall thickness is going to be 1 inch in there. I'm going to set a Z0 position off the material surface, XY position is going to be in the centre of my job, and then we could go ahead and press OK. Now before we go ahead and create our vectors, I just want to take a moment to review my snap options. So let's go to Edit, Snap Options, or I could press F4 on the keyboard. And you can see here we're now presented with the Snap Options dialog box. Now everything that you can see here is the software's defaults. We can see that geometry snapping and smart snapping are switched on because they're checked. Not only can I see they're switched on because of these checked boxes, but I can actually see them in the toggle bars in the view toolbar at the top of my view here. Okay, so they're both highlighted blue, meaning that they're switched on. Okay, so having smart snapping switched on will allow me to easily snap to lines and extensions that really don't exist as geometry, and so this makes it quicker and easier for me to draw shapes and align objects to in the software, and you'll see this demonstrated throughout this tutorial. Okay, snapping radius is at its default of 10 pixels, and now as I'm creating quite basic geometry, I'm going to keep my snap radius set to a medium of 10 pixels, as this enables me to snap to positions within my job within a 10 pixel radius, and again it just makes it quicker and easier for me to create my geometry. Now these are the settings I prefer for this type of work. You may find that you would need to play around with the radius to find the most comfortable setting for yourself. So let's just go ahead and press OK. So we're going to start by drawing up the main base shape of our sign. So we're going to begin by drawing a rectangle. Now in this case I'm just going to put values into the form of how big I want this rectangle to be. Okay, so I want the anchor point to be in the centre, I want X to be at 0, Y to be at 0, square corners, I'm going to give that a width of 15 inches, and we're going to give that a height of 30 inches. Go ahead, press create, and you can see it's been added to my job there. You can then go ahead and close this down. The next shape I'd like to create is a circle. So let's go and create that circle. So we're going to use the draw circle option. Okay, so one way of doing this is I could enter the values of the centre point in this form, followed by whether I want to put in a diameter or a radius, and I enter that value there, and then the shape will be created. The other option is I can just go into my job and actually draw out the shape myself. For instance, I'm going to make the centre point of my circle at x0, y0. I can see that snapping to the job centre there, and then I can just pull the shape out, and you can see that it's going up in increments of 2. Okay, so that's all dependent on how far you're zoomed in on your job, along with your snap options. Now in this case, what I would like to demonstrate is how we can create a shape using the transform shortcuts, or what we sometimes refer to as the quick keys. Now in the case of drawing a circle, it's quite simple. You draw a shape, so with your mouse, with your left mouse key held down, you type in a value on the keyboard, followed by whether you want that to be the radius or the diameter. And the keys for those are D for diameter, R for radius. In this case, I want to give this circle a diameter of 21 inches. Therefore, with my left mouse key still held down, I'm going to type in on the keyboard 21. You can see that value displayed at the bottom, followed by the letter D, and then that will create my circle with a diameter of 21 inches, and we can see that that's now updated in the form there. So let's just close that down. So now I just want to align this circle to the top of the rectangle. So I'm just going to take that, drag that up the horizontal there so I can keep that in line, and then once I hit the top of that rectangle I can see that I've snapped that in place. I'm now in line with the top of the rectangle there. The next thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to create several offsets. So we're going to take my circle, which we've got selected here, and we're actually going to go ahead and offset that. And we're going to offset that outwards by 3/4 of an inch. Now in this case I want to uncheck create sharp offset corners, uncheck delete original, and uncheck select new. Go ahead and press offset, and it's created that vector and it's offsetted that outwards by the value that I've got here. So it's done that by 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so the next thing that I'd like to do is take the vector that we still have selected and create another offset. This time we're going to go inwards. So I'm going to use the inwards option. This time we're going to go inwards at 1/2 inch, and this time we're actually going to use the option to select new, and by selecting the new means that when we offset that, the new vector is now selected. Okay, and with that vector selected we're going to offset that one inwards by 4 inches. Again, select new checked, and offset that, and then with that one selected we're going to offset that inwards one more time. We're going to do that at a value of 1/2 inch, offset that inwards there. Okay, so last offset I want to do is on this rectangle. So I'm going to select that rectangle, so I'm going to offset that outwards. I'm going to offset that outwards by 3/4 of an inch in there. I'm going to use this option to create sharp offset corners so it keeps the corners in place. And then we could go ahead, press offset, and then we can close that down. We now have all of our offsets in place. So the next thing I'd like to do is take this rectangle, hold down shift and select this outer circle, and I'd like to weld the two vectors together so that we just keep the outer silhouette of the two. So to do that we're going to use the weld option. You can see that it's done that there, it's removed everything inside for us. Then I'm going to take this rectangle here, hold down shift and select this circle here, and again we're going to do the same. I'm going to weld those together. Next set of shapes I'd like to create will form the hanging holes for my sign. So to do that we're going to go and draw a circle. I'm going to snap to this corner here. I'm going to draw a circle out, and again I'm going to use the transform shortcut. So I want to give this a diameter of 1.25, so I'm going to type in 1.25 as displayed at the bottom, and I'm going to type in D for my diameter, and I can see that circle there has been created. So let's just close this form down. Now if this circle's selected, I actually want to move it so it's positioned roughly around here, which is just 2 down and 2 across. So if that's selected, let's go over to move selected objects. I'm going to move it relative to where it currently is, and in X we're going to go across 2 inches, Y we're going to come down, so I need to type in -2 in there. Go ahead, press apply, and you'll see it's updated that for me. I can close that down. Now I'd like to create a copy of this circle horizontally on the other side here. So with that selected, let's go over to mirror selected objects. Okay, we're going to flip that about the job center. We're also going to create a mirrored copy. And we're going to use the option here to flip horizontal. And we can see we've got my second copy over there. The next shape that I'd like to create is going to represent the cross section for the 2-rail sweep modelling function in order for me to create a border between these 2 rails here. So let's just zoom in. Okay, so we're going to create a shape that's going to represent a border that we're going to sweep between these 2 rails in a later session. So to do that, let's just go into the draw polyline option. Okay, so I'm just going to draw a shape, so I'm just going to click in place, and you'll see that as I click and move my mouse, I'm presented with a vertical line, presented with angled lines and horizontal lines, and these are all to do with the smart snapping features. It just enables me to easily create shapes as I can walk along these as guides. So I'm just going to bring this up to 1/2 inch. And I'm going to come across over here and I want to make that 3/4 of an inch. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so I can get the length there of 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to bring that back down so we've got a length of 1/2 inch there, and then we can click that in place, and just to make sure that I know that we're in line with our original point, I can see that represented by this line here. Okay, as we're creating cross sections, they need to be open shapes, so we're going to leave it at that. So we're going to right click to come out there, then we're going to edit the shape using node edit. I'm going to take this node here, I'm going to snap to the center of that object, and then I'm going to right click in this span. I'm going to make that a Bezier span. What I'd like to do is line these handles up vertically and horizontally with their opposite node. So I'm going to take this control handle here, and the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to wake up the node by just hovering over it, and then that should bring out the vertical line, which we can see here. Okay, so I'm just going to bring that up like so and click that in place. I'm going to take this control handle, wake up this node. This time I'm going to come out horizontally, so I'm going to come out to the left, and we can see that line has appeared. I'm able to follow along with that so that I get a nice straight pull out of my cross handle there. Right click on this span here to Bezier. I'm going to do exactly the same. So I'm going to take that handle, wake this node up, go up vertically, take this handle, wake this node up, come out horizontally there. So you can see I've got a nice shape created here with the help of the smart snapping. So let's just put that back into normal selection mode, and then we're going to use this option here to zoom to fit. So the next part of the design that I want to look at is the leaf motif that we're going to draw here. And before we do that, I just want to draw in some lines so I can see how this circle breaks down. So I'm going to use the polyline tool. I'm going to snap to this point and then snap to that point there, and press space to enter that in. Snap to this point and snap to that point, space to enter that in, and I can see here that I've got a segment for my fresh text there, segment for my coffee text there, then here we're going to have my leaf on the left hand side. So I'm going to close that down. So let's start by drawing up a dome for my leaf motif that I'd like to have in the centre of this vector here and this vector here. Okay, so I'm going to look at using the Smart Snap options to help me locate that centre point between two different vectors. So let's just zoom in a little. So I'm going to go into the Draw a Circle option, and to do this, what I need to do is I just need to wake up this point here. So I just hover over this point, and I'm just going to come across the horizontal. I'm going to wake this point up here. Okay, then I'm going to come back, and as I travel over that, you can see that we now have the halfway point, and I can see that because my cursor's changed into a crosshair, allowing me to snap to that point. So I can now draw out a shape. In this case, I want to give this dome a diameter of 1.5 inches. So again, I'm going to type in 1.5. You can see that displayed at the bottom. D for diameter, and you can see it's created that circle. It's created it in the centre of these two vectors, all with the thanks of the smart snapping. So let's close that down, and then we'll just use the option here to zoom to fit. So now I'd like to look at drawing the actual leaf motif here. Now, as I'm about to draw an organic shape, I'm actually going to turn the smart snapping off, so there's no need for me to have the smart options available when I'm drawing an organic shape. And I'm also going to go into the snap options here, and I'm just going to bring my snap radius all the way down so its radius is now at 4 pixels, as this just allows me to make points exactly where my cursor is. So now I'm just going to zoom in here. I'm just going to go into the polyline tool, and then we're going to roughly sketch in the shape of my leaf. Okay, so I'm just going to come out here, come up over there, then we're going to come over here, and then join those back up. Right click here to come out of the polyline tool, select that vector. I'm going to go into node edit mode. I'm just going to box select those bottom nodes there, press S on the keyboard to smooth them, and then we could look to really transforming the shape of the vector that we've got. Okay, so we're just going to pull on the handles, move the nodes until we're happy with the actual outcome of the overall shape. I'm going to bring that over. Okay, so that's not too bad. Let's just zoom out a little, maybe click in the white space just so we can see the overall shape there. I want to come back in here. Might want to just bring this down a little. Maybe make that leaf a little bit bigger. Okay, so that's not too bad. Choose the option here to zoom to fit. We'll go back into the normal selection mode. You can see the shape of the leaf that we have there. Now the way that we're going to model this leaf is by using the 2-rail sweep option. So I need to cut this vector in two. So to do that, let's put it into node edit mode. Right click over this node here, cut vector, or I could press C on the keyboard to do that. Right click, C to delete that. So now we have two separate vectors there. So now we've got my rails. What I need to do now is actually draw up a cross section for those rails. So for the cross section, we're actually going to base that on the shape of an ellipse, which we'll look at editing afterwards. So let's just zoom into this space here. So I'm going to pull a shape out that has a width of 1.5 inches. I can see that displayed there. And I want to give that a height of 0.6. So with that drawn out with a 1.5 inch width, I'm just going to type in 0.6, you'll see it displayed at the bottom, followed by Y, and that's going to input that height of 0.6 with my width that we already dragged out of 1.5, and we can see that displayed there. So let's just close that down. I'm going to go into node edit mode by pressing N on the keyboard, right click, we're going to delete this span here, right click, and we're going to delete this span here as our cross sections need to be open vectors. I'm just going to box select just this node here. I don't want the handles selected, and I'm just going to take that, I'm just going to drag that over, and you can see we've got a nice natural sort of shape of a cross section of a leaf. And this is going to be the cross section for the leaf that we've just drew there. So let's just put that into normal selection mode. We'll use the option here to zoom to fit. So the next part that we're going to look at now is the fresh coffee text that we're going to place in the top and bottom segments of this circle here. So before I create the text, what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a copy of this circle here, as ultimately we're going to use this circle to align our text to. So to do that, I'm just going to right click on the circle, I'm going to use the option here, copy to layer, new layer. We're just going to call this one safe. I'm just going to make that invisible, then we could go ahead, press OK. If I go to my layers tab, we can see the new layer has been created there. Let's just switch off layer 1, switch on safe, and I can see my circle there. Okay, so let's just turn that off, switch on layer 1, make sure that's the active layer. And then I'm going to come over and use the trimming tool. I'm just going to trim the left and right hand side of the circle to my construction lines. Then we can close that down. Okay, so now these two curves that we've got here is what I'm going to use to align my text to. So let's go ahead and actually create that text. So all I need to do is type in the text that I'd like to use. In this case, we're going to call this one Fresh Coffee, and I need to select my font. Okay, the font I want to use is Impact, so I'm just going to press I on the keyboard, and that's going to bring that font up there, and I just select that. I want to align my text to the centre. I want to give that a height of 2.5. We could go ahead and press apply there. You can see that my text has been created. So let's just close this form down. So now we're ready to align the text to these curves. Now at the moment the text is actually one entity, and I need to break this up in order for me to align fresh to this curve here and coffee to this curve here. To do that, I select the text, right click, and use the option to break text block into lines. They are now two separate entities. Selecting the fresh word, shift and select the curve that I want to align it to. We're going to come over to this option here, text on a curve. So in this form I've got lots of different options for me to wrap my text to the curve. Okay, so let's just start at the top. I'd like to maintain that text size. Text spacing, we'll come back to that shortly. Text position, I want that to be positioned above the curve. Text alignment, I want that in the middle. And I want to align the actual text to the curve. Then I could go ahead, press apply. Okay, so it's created that on the other side of the curve. So I'm just going to use this option here, and that will automatically put that on the other side for me. You can see that the text is actually on the curve. Now I'd like to apply a little bit of an offset, so I'm going to type in an offset distance of 3/4 of an inch, and you'll see it's automatically updated that for me. I can see I've got quite a bit of space between each one of these letters, and I can alter this by using this slider here. So you'll see that the more I move to the left, the closer together the text becomes. The more I move it to the right, the further apart those letters become. Okay, so we'll keep it about that. That looks okay. So I'm happy with that. So now let's select the word coffee, shift and select that curve. This time we want to go below the curve. Okay. And then we could go ahead, press apply with all the same settings, and you can see we've got the coffee there at an offset distance of 3/4 of an inch. So let's close that down. Now not only do we have the option to alter the text spacing within that form that we was just in, we also have the option to do that outside. So I can select this text and I can use this option here, edit text spacing and curve. And what this will do, if I hover my mouse between any of these letters, you'll see that we've got two arrows that are pointing directly at each other. And so now when I click, it's going to bring those letters close together. To do the opposite, I could simply hold down shift and you'll see that the arrows are now pointing in opposing direction. And so I could click and that will just make them further apart. Okay, so I'm happy with the way that that looks, so let's just put that back into normal selection mode. So now I can select all of the construction lines that we created just by holding down shift and selecting them. I'm going to press delete on the keyboard to delete them as I don't need them anymore. And then in our layers tab, let's just bring back the circle that we copied over to that safe layer. And so to do that, I'm actually just going to delete this layer. The software is going to tell me that there is data on this layer and what do we want to do with it. Do we want to move it to layer 1 or do we want to delete it? So let's move that to layer 1 and you'll see that it's been brought back to layer 1 and that's the only layer that I now have. So now let us create the magic beans text that's going to sit at the lower portion of the sign, which we'll ultimately use for V carving. So we're going to go and draw up some text. So in here I'm going to type in magic and beans. The font that I'd like to use is Cambria, so I'm going to press C on the keyboard to bring up all the C fonts. There we go, there's Cambria. I'd like to make that bold. In the centre, I want to give that a text height of 4 inches, press apply, I can see it's been added there. I'm going to take that text, and holding down Alt, I'm just going to bring that down, so Alt just keeps that in line vertically for me. And then we're just going to edit the space in between the two words. And you'll see here that we now have lines pointing at each other, where I can just bring the two lines together. So it's not too bad. Put it back into normal selection mode. I'm just going to select that, again holding down Alt. I'm just going to position that down like so. Might just want to nudge that up once using the up arrow key. So now I just want to change the width only. I like the height of the part, I only want to change the width so it fits within the lower part of my sign. So to do that, let's just change the size. So I'm going to make sure link XY is unchecked as I only want to change the width here. And we're going to give this a width of 14 inches, press apply, close that down, and there we have our magic beans text. So the last set of vectors we're going to create are going to represent the coffee beans that are going to sit in this central area here. So to do that, I'm going to use the option to draw an ellipse. I'm just going to roughly sketch in a shape. Okay, something like that looks okay. I'm going to close that down. And then I'm just going to rotate that round a little. To do that, just select the blue, any one of these blue handles, I'm just going to sort of manually by eye choose how much I want to rotate that by. Okay, so that's not too bad, maybe a little bit more. And then what I'd like to do now is create a copy of this bean. I just want to make a smaller bean, so I'm going to do that based on this vector that we've got here. To do that, I'm just going to hold down Control to create a copy. I'm also going to hold down Shift, and then when I select one of these transform corners and bring that down, that shift is just going to change that shape in proportion for me. Okay, so I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so that's not too bad. And then I'm just going to roughly position that in place. May want to make that a little bit smaller there, and just bring that over until I'm happy with where it is. Okay, so that's not too bad. To help me see this a little bit better, I'm actually going to select this vector here, and we're going to use this option to zoom active view to the selected object. So it's just going to zoom in on that vector that we've got selected there. That way I can see my beans a little bit better. So I'm just going to take that bean, I'm actually going to nudge it up just a little bit more. Okay, so that seems to be okay. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to introduce a little bit of a groove to this little bean that we've got here. So to do that, let's go into Node Edit mode, and I'm just going to insert a point here. So right click, insert point, and then I'm just going to right click in between those points there. So zoom in there, insert another point, and I'm just literally just going to pull that back a little bit just to create a little dimple there. Let's put that back into normal selection mode and select this circle here and then just zoom there. So now I'd like to take both of these vectors. I'm just going to box select to highlight both of those, and I'd like to align them to the centre of this circle. So to do that, I'm going to select them, select the centre point of the two items. I'm just going to come down until we find that snap point. So that's the centre of this circle here, and I know that we're aligned there. Let's just go back into normal selection mode, and I'm going to use the option here to zoom to fit. So one last thing to finish this off, I just want to draw a crease in the larger bean that we've got there. So again, I'm going to select that vector, just going to go zoom selected into the polyline tool, and roughly going to sketch in a crease shape like this. I'm going to join that back up there. Right click to come out of the polyline mode, select the vector into node edit mode. Here I'm just going to right click on that node, we're going to smooth it, right click on this node, smooth it again. I could press S to do that. And I'm just going to grab these handles and just alter the shape of that. So you can see we've got that crease in there. If I wanted to, I might want to select all of them, just move them over a little bit. Do the same for these, just move them over. I think I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to go back into normal selection mode. One last thing, might want to just rotate this bean round ever so slightly. Let's put that into the zoom to fit view. We'll just click to deselect that so we can take a look at this as a whole. So that completes this vector drawing exercise where we've looked at lots of different ways that we can draw in the software. You can see how we use these vectors to model the sign in the related videos. So let's go and save this file. So go to File, Save As, and in the Project folder, we're just going to name that Magic Beans Coffee Sign Vector Drawing, and you can access that file from that project folder.